In today's episode, Rebecca and I discuss the topic of pain. Please keep in mind that all opinions expressed on this podcast are solely our own. While we have extensive experience as strength coaches, we are not physicians, nutritionists, or registered dietitians. All information is intended for your general knowledge. Information provided by 5x3 Radio is not a substitute for medical advice. Thank you. Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show. I've been asked, when's the next pain podcast coming out?
Oh, for real? Who was asking?
One of my clients, one of our members. Like, when's the next one coming out?
I was thinking about this when I was walking the dog. I do not remember what we talked about in the last one.
I know. That's what I was going to ask you. So what we talked about the last time was basically we gave our background. I talked about my back pain. You talked about, your knee pain and other various things that you've experienced. And just the overall, the experience you had at the gym when you, I think, were deadlifting and you just kind of freaked out because it had happened but it never happened before. And so just kind of learning how to calm yourself down and be able to get back in the gym and back under the bar after having that experience of, I've never had this happen to me before. What did just happen?
Wait, did I talk about like the Bikram yoga thing?
Yes. Yeah. So we talked about that. We talked about what pain was, what it is. It's an alarm. It's not a damage indicator. It just lets us know that there's something afoot. We also discussed that that your MRI or your X-ray, you are not your MRI or your X-ray, that can be not an indicator that there's something wrong, that something could have been there all along. You're asymptomatic, and then bam, the minute you see results, all of a sudden you're symptomatic. Because your brain has now triggered this, oh, well, I have pain and the MRI says this. So yes, but the two may not be correlated. We talked about the bathtub analogy, in regards to.
Oh, okay, good.
We definitely talked about stress, and stress can play that. We ended the podcast with stress, that stress can play a major role in also you having perceived pain, and the pain again can be real, of course. No one's going to discount, but is it real because there's physically something there, or is it real because you're bothered by something else? There's something else going on. I know that one of my clients recently, she came in, and this is after the holiday, we'd had some time off, and her back went into spasm from deadlifting. Now she's not deadlifting heavy at all. And she's been going through a lot of life changes. And also there's been a major upheaval recently, politically.
A collective trauma.
Right? So however you look at that, but that has been amazing. So that compounded with just her own life stresses, all of a sudden her back was in spasm. And she knew that.
Sorry. Yeah. Do you have a new tattoo?
I have a new one right here. Yes.
Yeah, I like that. What?
So that is Morse code. And it's my sister's name in Morse code.
That's cool. I like that.
So one of my girlfriends sent me a bracelet for Christmas, and she said she thought of me, and it was in Morse code, and it's spelled out. And I'm an adult. We're both adults here. We I can use this word. It's spelled out, fuck cancer. And I say that a lot, obviously, in my Instagram post when I'm talking about Ullman.
Right.
So it's spelled out in Morse code. And then it came with this cool card that had Morse code, the alphabet in Morse code. And I thought, that's my next tattoo. will be my sister's name in Morse code. And we picked right along here on my.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you. I was funny.
That's cool.
I didn't think people would notice it because it's so subtle.
No, but it's like super cool. I like the ones where it's like along here and you read it when you're, yeah, but whatever.
So that's great. I'm getting ready for the big one on my, well, I won't say because my husband's listening.
Okay, now I'm really curious though.
I'm going to call
what?
I'm cutting this part out because Diego does listen to this podcast. No, but there's a lot that we've just, I was talking before, in the beginning, I want to keep because I think it's relevant. But yeah, let's just jump into, in regards to part 2, that when we start to train, things might arise that, as we become more active, we may experience discomfort, right? Discomfort kind of goes along with getting stronger, right? You and I both say often, be comfortable getting uncomfortable. You hear that a lot, and that is true. You have to get uncomfortable. People often want the easy way out. They want the easy way out when it comes to losing weight. They don't want to have to give up certain foods.
That's why everybody wants a pill and they just want to walk.
Right? There's a wonderful cartoon that is, there's 2 people kind of like behind almost like a ticket booth, right? And the one is lifestyle changes, and there's nobody in front of that line.
Yeah, right. I've seen that.
And then the other one is pills, and it's like tons of people lined up for that because we want an easy fix. We want to be able to lose the weight fast. We want to be able to
we're a country of instant gratification.
Exactly. We want an immediate we want an immediate response. I'm bad about that. Like when I text somebody and then I'm like, okay, how come that person hasn't gotten back to me yet?
It's been a full minute.
I want an immediate answer. And so, and when it comes to getting stronger, when it comes to training, we all like the idea of being stronger, gaining muscle, gaining strength. And there's, of course, Ronnie Coleman's, everybody want to be a bodybuilder. Nobody want a big lift, no, heavy ass weights. I mean, it's like and that's true. So at times, as you start to train, as you start to lift heavier and heavier is relevant, right? You're going to experience possibly some discomfort. You may even experience quote unquote pain or unquote pain where, something starts to bother you. How you work through that physically and mentally is a real, it takes time. It takes patience. It takes, I think, oftentimes even a good coach help address what is actually going on. Many times people will just kind of work through it on their own and keep going back and forth and hurting themselves and then restarting again until finally they come and they need somebody to help them slow down, and be held accountable for their training because they just don't know how to really take care of the issue. So I want to address, let's say you do have somebody who comes to you, who's been training for some time and starts to feel discomfort. Elbow pain is a good example because we've all experienced that. Let's talk about that. Like what could, I know you've experienced that like in your coaching. Someone's come to you and they've been dealing with some elbow pain. Maybe you've seen the person, maybe you haven't seen the person. It's often harder when you haven't seen the person and you've been training them online, as many of us have, because hey, we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
What do you do? So what do you do? What are some tactics that you use to help people who you're training and you have not seen in person, and help them through their training and through this bout of discomfort or pain?
Yeah, elbow pain is an interesting one because that's actually also like when Todd was training, when he started training, like that was the thing that was affecting him. And it was like he was getting that, that elbow tendonitis
right.
that happens when people hike their elbows up instead of, making the Superman chest to get the muscle shelf for the bar.
Right.
So he was hiking his elbows up. And that was like early on. And he came with me up to 5x3 and Diego was like, oh, well, here's what's going on. And in that case, right, there was something that he was doing. It was a cause and effect situation.
Right.
And I think people have often this idea that that is all that pain is, that it's a cause and effect relationship.
Right.
And right, that's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, right, if there's a hot stove, you stick your hand on it, your hand gets burned, that's cause and effect. There's some pain, but that's not always the whole story.
Right.
And Todd's reaction to that was stop training, right? Which is also problematic.
Yes.
And I mean, there's something to initially trying to reduce the inflammation, and maybe you're doing that with NSAIDs, or maybe you're reducing your training, or maybe hopefully you don't stop doing the lift, you just find a modification until the tendonitis decreases. But then what also has to go along with that is fixing the movement pattern, right? So if it's something that's caused by user error,
right,
just because you've decreased the inflammation, you've reduced the pain, you haven't fixed the cause or addressed the cause. So the two things need to go hand in hand. So that whole conversation with Todd about not stopping training was something that didn't go well, and because he's my husband, I didn't push it. I left that alone. I just was like, that's not the right answer, and walked away.
Why you don't train your spouse?
Let him do,
or your partner, right?
Yeah, let him do what he was going to do. And then when he did get back to lifting for a little bout of time, I just didn't even want to deal with it. I was like, you're just going to high bar squat.
Right.
We're going to eliminate that problem. We're not going to even address it. But I mean, that's not like your ideal situation necessarily. But he definitely has this idea that a lot of people have, that pain is always a cause and effect situation. And that's where I think some of the analogies that we were talking about last week can be helpful for people who think like that, because I've tried talking to him straight out before about the biopsychosocial model of pain that Baraki writes about and that barbell medicine talks about so often. And his initial take on that was like, oh, that's a lot of woo-woo stuff. You're telling me this is all in my head. That's baloney, right? Mm-hmm. And for, I think, a certain type of engineering, mathematically inclined brain, that's probably how it sounds. So the analogies kind of allow for easier transmission of that information. But how those conversations take place depends a lot on your understanding of who that person is and how they're going to best receive that information. And so when I'm talking with Todd, I know him pretty well.
Right.
And he gives me pretty honest feedback, and I'm working with him in person. So those exchanges of ideas can happen maybe much more organically or naturally. When you're working with somebody online, like is happening often now because of the pandemic, it's a little bit harder to gauge those sort of things. Like I've got some clients that have started with me online that I've never met in person. We've had phone calls, we've had Zoom meetings. I've watched them lift like real time via Zoom, but still getting to know a person and their personality and how they interact with the world and will absorb and understand information is a lot slower process that way than it is when it's somebody who comes into 5x3 3 times a week, and they're there for an hour or maybe more. You see them 3-5 hours every week, and you really get to know them as a person, and you figure out what's the best way to convey this information to them. Are they going to be open to an analogy, or are they going to be open to like a more direct conversation about psychological or sociological influences that are affecting their beliefs about pain? Mm-hmm. You also can get a better read on whether they're a sort of person who tends to hyperfocus on certain areas that are painful. If they come in, they're there for 5 hours out of the week, and they spend half of that time talking about their elbow. Mm-hmm. Or if that's the first thing they say to you when they walk in the door, you can kind of get a better gauge on their, like where their head is where their focus is and what sort of signals they're going to be extra vigilant about paying attention to that come from their body.
Right.
And you can also get a better feel for whether a person has a tendency to catastrophize. They can do a
Good
set
word.
and then they use certain language like, oh, that killed me, or I feel like garbage right now, or how they talk about it is a little bit muted for most people when it's an online exchange, or when they're just typing some comments to you. I've got one guy that I've worked with in person who's now transitioned to online, and oh my god, he'll go on for paragraphs. Like, he does not hold back. But I also know him from working with him in person.
Right.
And he'll say things like, he'll sometimes be like, that set was garbage, right? And I don't take that the same way from him. I know he's not catastrophizing because I know him. But if I only get that feedback from someone online, it's a little bit harder to sort of put it into context.
Absolutely, because you can't really see. You're looking at their videos after the fact. You don't see anything wrong. Maybe this person is just one to over analyze everything, and there are people like that. Every little thing they do wrong in their sense is just like the whole set was a mess. Then they went on their toes one time in one rep. Well, that was a disaster. That was a bad set. They get their reps, but the last rep was like so out of whack. Well, that was that. I might as well stop now. I'm pathetic. I can't do anything. I mean, you have people who are at that extreme, and then you have people who are in the middle, and then you have people who don't care at all about and it's okay because they're just there to like not fall down every time they get up. I like the word I'm going to say it wrong. So I'm going to say catastrophize, where they like everything is just so big and beyond, like they're wrecked all the time, even though they're obviously not wrecked, squatting 65 pounds, let's say. I mean, we definitely have working with a client, a member, and this person's great, but everything is always, God, I hurt. Oh, you have no idea my neck. Oh God, you have no idea my leg. And it's like, you kind of just nod your head and go, you look fine. You're like, you look great. Like, that was a great set. Yeah, but I'm wrecked. Yeah, you look great. And then of course they, the next day you find out that they went hiking for 10 miles, like the day before, or they go out that day and, bike 20 miles. So how can you be wrecked and then go bike 20 miles? It doesn't make any sense. And it's just, I think you start to learn that that's the personality of the person. They're really not wrecked. They just like to make everything bigger, because it's who they are. Maybe they felt something, and in that little bit of discomfort, it means they're wrecked. Whereas someone else like us, discomfort is just, that's what it is. It just kind of goes along with having lived a long life and having been very active and, doing something that's, maybe eventually going to cause some discomfort. But it is really tricky to, you have to, like, I think you hit the point where you have to know the person. And working with someone in person and then working with someone online and you've never seen them and really gotten to know them, that's a challenge. Yeah. Because I think that one-on-one, in person, is you really do get to see that person every day, or at least once or twice a week, or however you're working with that person, and you can really start to see how they warm up, what are they doing between their sets. You can catch all the little details that are happening in real time. If they don't tell us either what they're doing outside of the gym, that's going to impact them when they come in and train, then we're lost too. Like I don't like it when I find out that my clients, like somebody has done a 12-mile run when they're coming in the next day to train, or they decide, as one person did when we were off, to go to another gym and lift instead of with iron plates instead of bumpers. This person's not deadlifting 135. So they're using 25-pound iron plates to deadlift with instead of bumpers. Right. Well, what do you think is going to happen to you when you all of a sudden perform a lift incorrectly, or even if you're trying to perform it correctly, but you have the wrong equipment, or you're working in it's going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it did. And that's going to impact your lifting. It's like, well, why is your back bothering you? Well, I did this. You did what? So without even maybe thinking about it, like there wasn't any thinking or a process, and there wasn't any thinking going on. It was like, well, I want to go to the gym and I want to do my lifts, but they didn't have that guidance. It was almost like out of context. They were at someplace else. They didn't have the equipment. So instead of just not doing it, they chose to do it this way. Well, that impacted how they did the lift, which then made their back hurt, which then made them be in pain, and which then was like, I don't want to deadlift. It's like, no, we're going to deadlift. We're going to deadlift correctly with the correct equipment. So you're in the correct position. So you're going to move well, because that's part of it. We move differently when we're either in pain or when we're performing something that is not the correct movement. So things that people do outside of their training, which they don't, and maybe they don't realize, will impact their training and then cause them pain, which then becomes the training hurt me, not what I did yesterday. I didn't realize was going to impact what I do here in the gym today, which also now is causing my pain. It's there, and so then I think,
so you're talking about this interplay between, like, well, I mean, I'm saying pain isn't only cause and effect, right? That's a situation where there's a cause and an effect, but also mixed in with that is a belief structure.
Right.
And so what do they believe about the meaning of that pain?
Exactly.
So that the meaning of that pain in that situation is that I'm damaged, I should not move, I should not do that lift, I need to stop, something along those lines. So like the beliefs around pain and what that means plays just as much a role, because then what you're describing is the person is displaying avoidance behavior. They're trying not to participate. Then, you avoid certain movements. They become, in a lot of cases, more difficult to do. Right. Maybe there's increased stiffness or tightness of the muscles as a result of the stress that the person feels around that area, or the disuse of that area. So it compounds itself. Exactly. So it's like, and that's an interesting conversation to have with people also, depending on their personality type. Because even with people that I've worked with in person, when I talk to them about their beliefs around pain, sometimes, I mean, I had one client last year where I was sort of talking about this, and a similar situation. She had done something and wanted to avoid a particular exercise because she believed that it caused her pain. And I was trying to talk to her about what her belief system or her belief structures were around that particular exercise and the pain. And she initially took it as like, do you not, like, are you saying it's all in my head? And that was not what I was saying at all. I was saying, no. Whatever she was experiencing was real, but it's a combination of a lot of different factors, not just purely a cause and effect factor. But sometimes people will hear that as, you don't believe me, or something along those lines, which, because she was somebody that I was working with in person, it was easy enough to clear that up pretty immediately. Right. But
no, pain is, we say it's, when we say it's not, it's in your head, it's really, the pain's not in your head, obviously, but the body, it does influence what the brain says, so that it is,
and vice versa.
It's whatever you experience. Yes, it's going to linger. Your mind is going to remember. I was equating that, talking to Diego about, eating at a restaurant, and sometimes, yes, it's food poisoning, but eating at a restaurant, and then, like, I'll give you an example of my mom. Years and years ago, I was 15 when this happened. She had gone out to dinner with my dad, and then in the middle of the night, she was experiencing like major abdominal pain. And
I think you talked about this the last time.
Did I? When did she rush? I rushed her to the hospital. She had a twisted bowel.
And then I think I talked about one of my.
Did I talk about that? Because I
But
don't
she
think I.
equated it with the food from the restaurant.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
maybe you didn't. I'm
So
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
maybe I did. But I
Maybe
say
you
that
and I just had that conversation a
maybe we
different
did.
day.
That pain becomes coupled. That we
Mm.
something did 6 years ago. We did something, and now all of a sudden we're doing something again, and we remember. Oh yeah, well, 6 years ago I bent over to tie my shoe, and my back went out, and so I'm never going to tie my shoe again because, right? And who knows? I mean, she had this twisted bowel. This bowel has been twisting for years. It just happened like that. It finally was like whatever happened that night. She never went to that restaurant ever again. She associated that night with her twisted bowel, and that was it. Even though that may not have been, that wasn't the case. I mean, it wasn't the restaurant. It was years and years and years of this, of this bowel twisting.
Yeah. So, like, whether we had this conversation on our own or in the last
I
podcast,
don't think
because
I did.
I've got one of my kids who will not eat bean soup
Mhm.
because when I made bean soup, then she got some kind of like throwing up something that she attributed to the soup, which was not because other people
Yeah.
were sick then later in the week.
Yeah.
Just it was a bug. But she like, and now it's like you make the Hoppin' John on New Year's Day and she's like, oh no, I can't eat that. I'm like, you have to eat the beans. So totally different beliefs about beans too.
And I clearly remember like the one time being sick and throwing up. That wasn't from being hungover. When I was younger, I was younger, still living in our first house. So I was probably like maybe 8 or 9. And my mom, me, and Jimmy, I think Jimmy got sick, and Charlotte, we all got sick from some spaghetti dish or whatever. My dad was the only one who didn't get sick. So we're all vomiting. Like Charlotte made it outside of her room into the hallway. I think I made it down the stairs to my parents, outside my parents' room. But I ate spaghetti after that. It wasn't definitely there wasn't like, and
you're more motivated to eat spaghetti than my kid is to eat beans. That's what it comes down to.
But that could have been like a correlate, like, oh my God, the last time I had, I remember eating spaghetti and I vomited, and I'm never going to do that again because I'll never eat spaghetti. But so pain though can be coupled, and that is very, very hard to break someone from that, like that painful memory, because it is a memory, and they don't want to do X, Y, or Z again. And in some cases, there are definitely exercises that someone should not do, given what's going on in their body. I have a client who I've been working with, and we finally have been able to narrow down like what exactly is going on with the pain he's experiencing in his back, because it is real. And he had a really bad flare up over the holiday, enough where he had to start taking steroids, and he hasn't had that since he started in September with us. He's awesome because he's ready to like get back under the bar and figure out what he can and cannot do. We're taking bench pressing completely out of his program. He'd had it out of his program for some time. It's definitely the culprit when it comes to what's going on in his mid back, because he's got a cyst in his mid back and his thoracic spine. Now that wasn't known to him until he had an annual tear in his L4, L5 from a deadlifting experience where he was putting the bar down. He felt something go. It wasn't the bar coming up off the floor. It was putting the bar down. So he never knew he had this cyst until that happened. So now, of course, this is quite prominent. It's becoming more of the issue than the low back. He's got 3 wedge discs too. So he's a mild case of Schumann's disease. So he's got some, a little bit of scoliosis and kyphosis. So all that coupled together makes that kind of mid back area very, very painful. So we know that really hard kind of extension is bad. So yesterday he squatted. I'm waiting to hear from him today. He is of the place where he knows exactly what bothers him, right? We're just trying to figure out what exercises he can do where he's not going to have this flare up, and where he can train well and get stronger and just avoid exercises that aren't going to be beneficial to him, like benching. Like, he's not a power lifter. Yeah. He goes like, why do you need to bench? Yeah. You don't need to bench. He's got, he can bench, but it hurts him. So why do something that's going to always hurt you when you know that that's an issue? There's so many other exercises that he can do for his.
Can I just ask real quick?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what type of squat do you have him doing?
He's doing a low bar squat. He's got a real
Oh.
long back, so he's not
Oh.
he's not very pitched forward. A high bar squat would be much more painful for him to try to hold that bar with what's going on with him. So he does the bar sitting down lower makes him feel better. He doesn't have his eyes down as much. He kind of keeps his eye gaze up a little bit higher. That helps quite a bit.
Mhm.
But it feels great. Like that squatting that way feels wonderful. The other way he's experienced,
Interesting.
more,
Yeah.
less, so he can squat. Squatting is not the issue.
Even all of this that you're talking about, like your focus on all of this is what can you do?
Exactly.
And that helps a person
Yes.
construct their beliefs around their pain.
Yes.
The focus is on what the person is able to do, not you're broken, don't do this. I mean, there is a little bit of conversation about that, but just to weed out certain exercises to find what's possible. So keeping the focus on something positive like that, I think is helpful also.
Yeah. I mean, he said, he strung together 3 months of squatting 3 times a week. He said he hasn't been able to string together 3 times a week squatting in years since he had that, since his tear. So, conventional deadlift is hard for him. He's, sumo, he's like perfect sumo deadlifter because his back is just like a rod straight up and down. Right. So that's great. That helps there. It's the benching. And he was told, a while ago that's going to probably be a hard exercise for him to do because of the need to really,
The thoracic
engage that mid back. So we're going to try to work on some things that really keep the ribs down, and keep that spine as neutral as possible. I love him because he's so open, and he has basically said, "I'm in your hands." And I've said to him, "I'm in your hands." I mean, it's a two-way street. I tell him what I think, what I'd like to do with him. He gives me the feedback. When he came in yesterday, he wanted to squat, and then he wanted to also try some rowing. I said, I want to do just squat because I want to know how you feel today after just squatting, because you had this big flare up.
Mhm.
If we mess around too much and squat and then also do some rows and then you have a flare up, I don't know what the issue was. So I want to know that squat is not going to be the issue. And he was like, great, I'm good. Let's do it. So we just squatted. So I'll wait to hear today how he's feeling. And then tomorrow, that's when we're going to try like some push-ups. We'll try some rows. We'll, do some upper body work and see how he tolerates that. And then we can start to build his program from there. We did 3 months of real lightweight, kind of a linear, nice little linear progression, kind of building him back up. He had a little flare up after 2 months. It settled down. Then he had a big flare up. Obviously, we definitely kind of figured out what the culprit was, and it was benching, and most likely some of the pressing as well. Because even if you're strict pressing, you're still, eventually that upper back,
yours in particular,
starts to do its thing. So, but here is a client who I can see in person, who is open, who understands his pain, wants to be pain free, but also understands it's going to be part of managing it. He may never be completely out of the woods, but if he can manage it and have weeks and weeks and weeks where he feels good, he can play his guitar, he can go out and hang out with his girlfriend. That's all he wants. Right. He's not.
And this is a good point also. Like knowing the difference between manageable or tolerable pain.
Yes.
And something that really needs to be addressed. Like, I think, a lot of times people will come in with the idea that their lifting is going to be pain-free.
Mm-hmm.
Or that, as they're recovering from an injury, they're not supposed to lift until they feel no pain.
Yes.
Or even any DOMS, like no delayed onset muscle soreness afterwards, anything like stiffness in the area, nothing. Like that's not really how it works. And lifting with tolerable pain or discomfort is fine. That's not, that's not out of the
no. And what you're saying, and I hope people aren't hearing that like, oh well, Rebecca and Emily are saying I can lift in pain. No, we're not saying that. We're saying that sometimes, you have to get back to training, whatever you're doing, dumbbells, kettlebells, and move through that movement and allow your brain to calm down, allow your body to start to, reintroduce itself to movement, and stop where you need to. I mean, that's what I tell my clients all the time. And when they're coming back from something, you work up to where you start to feel like if I go a little further, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel more painful, quote unquote, than I wanted to. And someone's not going to feel anything. They definitely feel their body moving, right? They feel their body. But there's a difference between something that makes you flinch and something that's like, that just feels like it normally feels. Because I know that I'm not squatting today, and I didn't squat last week. I've aggravated my my hip flexor and my right side, which is my bad side, quote unquote bad side, from years of dancing, and it got aggravated, and I kept pushing it, and I can squat, and I kept feeling my hip, but I was like, well, I can push through. I'm still squatting, and then of course the next day the whole right side aches, and I'm popping ibuprofen, and then the day after that it aches more. Is it worth it? Is it worth it, or is it better to just take away what I know is bothering it, leave it alone for a while, and then slowly reintroduce that movement again? That's what I've done. And guess what? It is better. I was demonstrating a squat yesterday, and one of my clients said, oh, no, don't do that. Your hip. I said, actually feels great. And it feels good because I haven't added weight to it in a week or so. And that's me being, managing my issue, knowing that if I don't squat for 2 weeks, it's not the end of the world. I'm not a power lifter. I'm not getting paid to squat. I'm being paid to teach people how to lift correctly and manage their training and manage their living and help them develop their strength and develop good movement patterns and good training habits and good living. That is my job. And for me, if something bothers me, I'm going to take it out, replace it with something else. And then when things calm down, bring that exercise back in if I can do it. There are many other ways I can work my legs, and I am doing that. I'm pushing the yoke, I'm working it so I don't have that constant bending and opening and pressure on that hip. But that's,
So,
that's
having a language to talk about that is helpful. Like having a language to talk about pain between coach and client is helpful. And I know there's like some diagrams on the Barbell Medicine website that sort of show, like a range of what's acceptable in terms of tolerable pain, what's not tolerable, whatever.
Right.
But also, I think a tool that's pretty widely handy for a lot of people is that VAS scale. And I don't know what it stands for, VAS, but it's the thing that you see when you're in the doctor's office. And they're like, where is your pain on this scale of smiley faces from 1 to 10? And so having that sort of language is something that I learned that with Rory Alter, like talking about where a person's pain is, how much it increases if they're doing a particular exercise, how much of an increase in discomfort is acceptable and within sort of safe practice, and when you need to modify, change, that sort of thing. And like one of the things that she talks about is like if a person on the VAS scale is at a 2 out of 10, then you're safe to train. So this whole notion that you have to be pain-free in order to train, non-existent. Right? It's okay. And that's a 2 out of 10. That's not saying like you're experiencing something that's debilitating. Like you're crying on rep 3 because it hurts so bad, but you're going to do rep 4 and 5 anyway. That's not that situation. That's not okay.
Right.
But something that's mildly uncomfortable, that's a different story. And just having a way to talk about that and gauge the pain and be on the same page between coach and client is pretty important. And you can do that like online. You can do that virtually as well as in person. But like we were saying before, it is often easier to establish those parameters or understandings in person.
Yeah. And I think, when you bring your own experience into it, when you can empathize with the person and understand, that makes it definitely easier, right? I can empathize with my clients when they talk about their back pain. I've been there. I can empathize with them when they talk about their knees. I had knee surgery 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I can empathize with them when they talk about their elbow. I've been there too. I mean, my
Yeah.
I injured my shoulder in 2011 in a dance concert, and it hasn't, it really hasn't been right since. So what I've learned over the past how many years I've been working with that, is how to modify anything that bothers it. My squat, I definitely have modified my squat simply by doing a thumbs around grip as opposed to a thumbs over. When I do thumbs around, my elbow pain is nil. The minute I do thumbs over, it pulls on the shoulder, left shoulder, with then yanks on the elbow, and I'm tears are running down my face. Well, why am I going to force myself to do a thumbs over when thumbs around? I could squat just fine, So it's being able to address your clients and say, yeah, I understand you, I hear you, and here's what we're going to do. And the more open they are, the easier it is for you to communicate to them. If they're closed-minded, that's harder. And most of the time, the people who are coming to you, they're not closed-minded because they're paying for your service. They're putting their trust in you. And I also say, thank you for trusting me. I mean, that's what I said to my client yesterday before he left. I said, thank you for trusting me. He sent his girlfriend to me for coaching. So he trusts what I'm doing, because he knows that he has a say too. It's not just my way. It's me going, I'm here to help you. I don't know all the answers. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not a doctor, but I know what good movement looks like. I've done enough research about your issue that I've done my own research. You've given me enough information, and we can work together on this. And that is the thing. It's like the client shouldn't just kind of be dump it into your lap and say, fix me. It's help me. And you going, okay, what can you do? What can't you do? But also being encouraging and supportive of that person. Like, you got this, you're okay. Or, you know what? We're going to stop here today. I can see the movement, your movement's changing. So we're going to stop. Ryan came in yesterday with a big old boot on his foot because he stubbed his toe. He's going to hear this podcast. He doesn't know how he did it, but he ripped his toenail and off his toe. And I don't know what he did, but he didn't break his toe, but he did something enough that they put him in a boot. So, he's walking with this big boot on his foot. And I said, God, isn't it awful? Like, why don't they give you 2 boots? So then at least you're walking in two shoes of the same, as opposed to this big boot. And then you're right. And then you're like,
so you don't end up with a hip issue.
Yeah. You're walking like Frankenstein.
Back.
And he's laughing. I said, yeah. I said, and that's the worst thing. And when I broke my metatarsal, in 2007, and I know it was, I broke it. I never went to the doctor, but years later I said, I think I broke my foot. He goes, you did. What I try to do is walk as normally as possible. When I had my knee surgery, I tried to still walk as normally as I could when I could walk without the crutches, because any imbalance, right? Anytime you're going to favor one side, you're going to do damage, to the other side, and so trying to be as, none of us are symmetrical, but that is hard too. Like, try to walk normally as possible. Try to figure out how to move so that you're not favoring one side, because you start favoring one side because the other side's hurting. It's going to cause other issues. Easier said than done, but you try at least to work at that, because you don't want to all of a sudden have an issue, with the right leg when that's the left leg that was, causing you the problem to begin with. So a lot of things to consider, so many factors.
So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, something that you were talking about before with having empathy, right? Yeah. So I think that's an important feature of a coach. I think there's sort of a certain vein of stop being a fill in the blank.
Yes.
And really downplaying somebody's pain experience. That's not helpful. That's going to turn a client off and turn them away.
Yes.
So having an appropriate amount of empathy, and being able to relate to that, a person's pain or situation, relating to pain is important. But then there's also a balance between that and sort of overindulging. And so finding that balance, I think, like you were also describing, like talking about, hey, here's some research, right? And a lot of times that is sort of a neutral ground,
Mm-hmm.
where you can strike that balance. You're not completely dismissing what the person's saying, like, yeah, a lot of people experience that. Here's some information that might be helpful.
Yep.
And kind of working with people in that space,
Yep.
Can sort of help them get through whatever their misperceptions about
Yeah.
pain might be.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to, again, knowing your client, knowing yourself
Yeah.
as a lifter, but also the coach, you knowing your client, knowing the person, who embellishes a lot and saying, just get back to it. Come on, you've got this. And the person
Yeah.
who, there's something going on and saying, hey, we're taking this one day at a time. Do this, do 5 pounds today. If that feels good, great. Then we'll do 5 pounds next time. But if it feels good today and you want to do another 5 pounds, hold off on that until next time. I want you to feel good today. I want to end on a good note. That is, that, and then making sure the person is like they're hearing you did great today. You're good. We're going to add more weight next time. And the person comes in the next time ready to go.
Yeah.
That gives them encouragement, and psychologically makes them feel like they're in a better place. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel really good. I'm going to stay feeling good, because that next set could be the set that makes me flare up again, whatever, or not. A lot of times it's just mentally getting back to to training, not even physically, just the mental hurdle. The physical hurdle is will work itself out. I mean, obviously, God, we could spend how many hours talking about pain, but I think we covered what we tend to cover typically, in dealing with our clients and with ourselves too, and learning how to manage ourselves. I was telling one of my ladies, I got a couple of women who are pregnant and training, right now, and they're all in a different place. And the first thing they say to me, they always say, when they tell me, is like, what do I do? I say, you do whatever you want to do. You do what you're comfortable doing. And that's the same advice that I give to somebody who, maybe has experienced some shoulder issue or some elbow. Like, you do what is comfortable. You do what you can do. You're here they're there to manage your pain. With my ladies who are pregnant, I've got one who's training as usual. She's had to cut down her volume, but she's training as usual. Another one really wants to modify. And I said, that's great. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to training, and you're pregnant. It's what mentally you feel comfortable doing. I'm not going to tell anybody to keep to not train, but I'm also not going to tell them to hit PRs. I'm going to tell them to be mindful. And the same thing applies to somebody who's coming back from an injury or who's been experiencing something. You're going to do what feels good today. And then when you come in, you might do a little bit more, you might do a little bit less. And I think that's the best approach that we can just approach our own training. Those of us who just are doing this for mental reasons, health reasons, physically, just physically feeling good during our daily lives. That's really what it comes down to. Why strength training is important. It's to help us continue to live longer and live better. Unless you're a power lifter. You don't need to bench, squat, and deadlift.
That's a different conversation.
Totally. Which leads me to our next topic. I think, I have had people ask me about when are we going to talk about programming? So we need to maybe think about do we want to have a programming, discussion, and what does that involve? But our next podcast after this one will be with an interview with one of our favorite coaches, Craig Brooks. Will be on the podcast in a couple weeks. We're going to do an interview with Craig, former junior Olympian boxer and coach and boxing coach and strength coach. And I mean, what other credentials as Craig have, but he's
No, football coach.
football coach.
Did you say that?
Kettlebell. I mean, he's
Yeah.
I'm so excited to learn more about Craig. I mean, I've known him for a few years, and
yeah, he doesn't talk a whole lot. This will be interesting.
Doesn't. And I've known him. I've gotten to know him even better the past couple of years that he's been coaching and working with us. But I'm just like with Jay. I'm curious to learn more.
Yeah, I learned a lot about Jay in that interview.
I know. Jesse said he learned more about Jay in an hour than he's done in the 6 years that he's known him. So Craig will be on the podcast in a couple of weeks. And if you do have questions about any of the podcasts that we've already done, or if you have a question about our pain podcast, send that along. But look out for Craig's interview in a couple weeks, and then we'll see if we're going to discuss programming, unless we come up with another topic of discussion, or if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss. Have a great week, everybody. Happy New Year. It's 2021. Let's make the most of it.
I saw something, and it was like 2020 WON. It's like, yeah, it kind of feels like that.
It does. It's like I saw a
different kind of 2021.
2020 is over, and then it says 2021. Hold my year. Here comes 2021.
Yeah, I've done this. I've done the 7-day trial, and I'd like to return my subscription.
Jay, can I get a refund? Can I get a refund on 2021? All right, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you in a couple weeks with Craig's interview. Thanks so much. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's F-I-V-E, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.